بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, to send peace and blessings upon all of us, and especially his Prophet Muhammad and family and companions. Welcome all of you that are in the space. It's amazing to have you all here. We are few in number, but inshallah many in God's eyes. Inshallah. Ameen, ameen, ameen. Alhamdulillah, today I'll be substituting in for our beloved brother Ubaidullah Evans, and we have here with us Ndidi, who needs no further introduction. Alhamdulillah, we had her on here before not too long ago, and it was a beautiful class with Ubaidullah Evans and her discussing a few things about purification of the heart. This is an amazing poem written by Imam Maulud, and it's translated by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. And if you all have been following us, we're at the chapter of Blameworthy Modesty. Blameworthy Modesty, which at times I feel like it's something that I actually struggle with a lot. And I'm just being honest with everyone here that's virtually and with us at the space. This is a relatively, intense chapter for me, because I read it, I'm like, man, I know I have, not have I, but I've many times fallen into these kind of things that he points out so eloquently in his beautiful poem when we start reading through it. But inshallah, with that being said, real quick, Ndidi, how are you? How are you doing today?
Well, it's been a roller coaster of a day. However, it's just so good to see people. So it's so good to see you all, even though you're masked up and I can't really see your faces. I'm hoping that there's smiles underneath there, maybe there's twinkles and eyes, but.
So if we could put the mic closer.
Okay, sorry, yeah. No, this was a really interesting chapter. I definitely have some thoughts in regards to this concept of blameworthy modesty. It definitely made me reflect on some things, so I'm happy to get into it.
Yeah, well, what's one of the first things that crossed your mind when you're reading through this chapter?
So I think the first thing, and I'm wondering if people feel the same, was the definition of blameworthy modesty. Like, because even the title was like, what does that mean? Like, yeah. What is that? Like, when is modesty blameworthy? When is it not? And so he defines it here as it's something to be, like the modesty is something that to be praised within Islam, but it's blameworthy when it results in a person failing to denounce something that should be categorically denounced. And so it made me think about, how often we, myself or just people, we hold folks in esteem so much that we hold people sometimes above reproach. And we don't always call people out when they need to be called out. And then conversely, we're also kind of in like a cancel culture where some people are very quick to cancel people and denounce folks. And so it made me wonder what the balance was. Made me think about that. That's the first thing. The second part was we can get to the second part, but that's the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's one of the things that I feel like I've struggled with a lot. Not in the sense of like holding people in such esteem that, I just let things slide, but the reality that I love some people. I really like some people are very dear to me.
Yes.
And they might do something where I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily something that I would encourage people to do over and over, but I would find myself at times extremely shy and incapable of even addressing that situation because of their nearness to me, which is really amazing, right? Sometimes when somebody is not so close, maybe you don't, some people in the room, maybe they don't even know me, they're like, it's so easy for them to call me out on something because there's no currency there, there's no love currency there, or maybe there's no barrier, right? Because it's like, yeah, he's not doing anything for me anyways, like who cares, right? But the reality is that for me, it's harder when I'm really close to someone that I love, or someone that I actually hold dear to my heart at times, right? Because it's like, yeah, I love them, And you know, it might be easy sometimes if it's a spouse,
Mhm.
you call them out on it in private, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, why you doing this all the time? How
Yeah.
come when we're at my parents' house, you're
Mhm.
doing it, right? It's easy to do that, right? But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, let's say it's like, and I'm gonna dig a little deeper here, and you can stop me anytime you want. But let's say we're at like my family, my in-laws
Okay.
home, right?
Mhm.
And people that know me, my in-laws are not Muslim,
Mhm.
right? My in-laws are not Muslim.
Mhm.
So we're at their crib, and sometimes they drink alcohol,
Mhm.
and my boys are around,
Yeah.
and I'm there,
Mhm.
and in my heart, I'm like, man, what is this? Like, what do I do here?
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah.
They already think I'm weird,
Mhm.
right?
Oh
They-
yeah, you're,
they already
you're
think
a little
like,
different.
you know, we're different. You know, they already think, you know, the customs in Islam are
Uh-huh.
a little
Different,
harsh
yeah.
at
Mhm.
times, or
Mhm.
different. Like, why do you guys do this?
Mhm.
You know, and God bless them. Like, they love me. They accept me in their household. Their daughter became Muslim,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And they still accepted me.
Mhm.
Who am I to say at that point, like, hey, can you when we're at the table,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
That's why it hits me.
That can get tricky. I mean, that can get tricky. I think that yeah, you know, that's a very specific
Yeah.
example. Outside of that example, one of the things that I've learned, um, you know, in the last few years, you know, those who know me know that I've had gone through a very difficult period of loss and with my mother and her sickness and several family members and her passing.
God bless her soul.
I mean, Allah Yarhamaha, God bless her, and have mercy on her,
Ameen.
fill her grave with light. I mean, so in that process, there was a breaking. There was a lot of breaking for me. Like I was, you know, it was a lot of things that I lost in that year, that period of time, and I had to rebuild. And in that rebuilding, I had to do a lot of work, and I'm still doing a lot of work. And again, not just because or grief or sadness, but just, you know, there's lots of things that were lost during that period. And I had to rebuild and learn and study and do things, cultivate myself so that I could be a stronger person and hopefully a better person. And as I've been doing that, my friends have been holding me into account. Like they have been like not going easy on me because sometimes people when you're in close proximity to people, you love them, you don't want to hurt them, you don't want to offend. Sometimes if someone offends you, if someone offends me, sometimes when I bring it to their attention, I find them getting offended by the fact that I brought an offense to their attention. Can you all relate to that? Have you ever been in a situation where like, you know, you feel a little offended, you share with someone that you feel offended, and they're offended that you even said anything about it, right? And it's like, what am I supposed to do?
Everybody's offended now.
Right now,
Yeah.
we're all
Yeah,
offended,
we're all
collectively offended.
It's over.
Exactly. So what, uh, you know, especially with my mom not being here and able to give me that type of advice, I've had to get auntie advice and sisterly advice and all these type of things. And what I've noticed is that my friends are stepping up in terms of just like they're like, okay, look, I'm gonna give it to you hard and not easy because you need hard right now. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
it real. I'm gonna call you
Right.
out
Right.
until you get to where you need to get
Right.
because they can see things about me that I can't see, right? Because just like if I have something on my face, can I tell or can you tell?
No, I could tell.
Right.
And if I'm a good friend,
And if you're a good friend.
yeah.
So now,
Because some people just keep it on your face.
and some people would because of
Modesty
blameworthy
or
modesty, right?
shyness.
Right.
Yeah,
and
they don't,
shyness,
oh, I didn't
meekness.
want to say anything. I didn't want to make you feel bad.
So you just had me walking out here with stuff all over my face, right? That's how that works. So I think, so I say all this to say, not the scenario you gave notwithstanding, because that's a different part. But
that
just
one's like a tightrope.
that was a great, it was a
know?
great one. I still want to touch base on that, but just in general, one of the things that I've realized is that sometimes our love for people has to be strong enough so that we do call them out, right? Stop your brother when he's right. Help your brother when he's right and when he's wrong. There's
Right.
that hadith from I think it's from the Arba'in, right?
Like when
Hadith
he's oppressed,
Yeah,
and when he's the oppressor.
help your brother. Yes,
Yeah.
when he's when he's right and when he's wrong, when he's the oppressor and the oppressor. I've heard it
Right.
different ways. And they asked the prophet, well, how I know to help him when he's right or when he's oppressed, but how would I help him when he's wrong? Stop him, right? So we have to be we have to and so I think it goes to the prioritization. This is Mike.
That mic is giving you.
It does
something,
not like me tonight. But I think it has to go to the prioritization of putting what Allah would have us do before possible offense to this person or hurt or shyness.
Yeah.
And so when you are putting, if Allah is saying this is denounceable and needs to be denounced, then that's what comes first versus shyness, right? Because if not, then I'm making this person or my perception of this person or the esteem I hold for this person, my Allah, my God. You know what I'm saying? When if anything, I should be prioritizing that.
Yeah.
That's, but in regards to your family situation, that I like that example. I also like, the majority of my family, my mother converted. So the majority of my
Right.
family is Baptist. We got some Hebrew Israelites, some Jehovah's Witness. And I just think that everybody's situation is different. When I have dinner with my friends who are not Muslim, if they drink at the table, some of them will ask me, they'll say, hey, do you feel comfortable or not? Their doctrine doesn't require them to not drink. So they're not doing anything.
They're not doing anything
They're not blameworthy or anything like that. And I think even with your children, you can also explain like, this is part of their practice. This is our practice is that we don't drink, but for them, it's okay. And so when we're with them, this may happen.
Yeah, like for me internally, I drew the line at them knowing that you should never offer us this thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And you should never offer it, let's say, to my children.
Of course.
Period.
Yeah.
Right. And they know that line.
Yeah.
That's like the hard line. Right.
Yeah.
And I drew that line in my balancing act and realizing like, look, in the end goal is I want them to enter the garden with me, and I want them to see the truth with me of what I believe is the reason we do this work and why we sacrifice and etc. Right? Okay. So I want them to enter. So I'd never want to overly exert Islamic standings in such a way that it becomes a turnoff, right? And that's just my read on them personally, because that's the angle that they show me all the time, right? It's like these structures and these rules and this garm and then this beard and this, what's that nonsense all about, right? And once I realized that's what's holding them, I'm like, all right, let's bring it from a different angle, right?
Yeah.
Because those same things can be the things that bring people into the garden and into Islam. Actually, like I'll give you an example, Sheikh Yahya wrote us, right? One of the reasons why he entered into Islam is because he's like, oh my God, this is how I'm supposed to dress. You know what I'm saying? He loved the rules. He loved that clear definition of what to do or not to do, right? And others, that's not how they enter. Right?
Everybody has their path.
Exactly.
And even, it was interesting. My grandmother, Allah Yarhamha, God have mercy on her, made it to 98 almost. She was saying that, she said, baby, she said, we're all trying to get to the same place. We just have different roads to get there.
Yes.
So, I'm someone who believes that a believer is a believer, you know what I'm saying? And that Allah says the believers will go to paradise, And so my thing is that when people, they may find that pathway within Islam, but you know what I'm saying? I think what I know is that Islam is what I choose. You know what I'm saying? Islam is what I choose. And and it makes sense for me and it aligns with everything that I need. But the way that, like what you were talking about, like how some people see the restrictions versus the reward, I think that's kind of human nature. And I think that as Muslims, we have to be mindful of dogmatic doctrine that acts like there's only one way to be Muslim, like there's only one way to Muslim, right? Because I remember having this conversation with a brother, like talking about the Quran, and he was saying that, when I read the parts in the Quran that talk about hellfire, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go. I need that because it's like I don't want to go to hellfire. And I'm like, that's so interesting because when I read, read about like the gardens. It's like I want gardens beneath which rivers flow, So we're motivated by two different things,
Right.
And so you've got to, I don't say read the room, but you got to know your people. You know what I'm saying? You got to know your people and know that if I go with too hard on this may not work for this. Just like with children, there's the child is like, if you say don't, and that's good for them, give them the rules of what to do and not to do, and they're like, okay, cool. Then you might have the younger children like, but why? But why? But why? And you have to give them more of an explanation.
Yeah.
So we're just all different types of people, and we're all inshallah trying to get to the same goal, good success in this life and the hereafter. So
yeah, and we all know in our tradition, just to be clear to everyone that's listening at home or here with us in space, in our tradition, everyone that's been engaging in Islam knows just we never judge anyone's end anyways.
Oh yeah.
It's all in God's hands on who enters where and when and how, right? And you might look at something outwardly on the day of judgment, it might be completely flipped. And that's just the reality of what the Prophet ﷺ witnessed on what we just recently witnessed ourselves in Isra and Mi'raj, right? Where he goes and he's like, what's going on with these people? Well, these people were preachers and they're doing this now, right? And we see things are flipped. And I can extend that to say, like, even within people's sincere faiths in different religions, right? In Surah Al-Baqarah, it says that, right? Whether you're Christian, Jewish, or Sabian, right? You'll enter into the garden. So like the reality of that is that you also have a sincerity in your heart between you and God that will take you into that direction. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to showing like my family that true route of why I follow what I follow, that's where I'm sensitive about.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because I don't want them to look at me like, Ali, you're just crazy, you're just crazy.
But I think you should show them the things that make it so great, like the things that how it, you just, Ali, you talk so very passionately about so many things, and it's like I feel like anybody who would be around you and experience that will be like, man, like, okay, like that guy's cool. Like,
Inshallah. I mean, or they might think I talk too much at times. But that's another reason why modesty might be good. You don't want to be overly conversational with people. You might want to step back, which believe it or not, Imam Ali used to talk about that all the time. Mm-hmm. He would say, like, give me 3 minutes with someone. That's all he used to say to people. Like, just give me 3 minutes.
All I need is 3.
All I need is like 3 minutes with someone. I'll know exactly who they are and what right when they speak, basically, right? And he used to say it took me longer to figure out how someone is when they were less of a speaker, right? Where they took things in more. And you see that with people sometimes where, alhamdulillah, they take their time to speak. And from that, when they do, a lot of wisdom pours, right? And that is also centered in I would say, and I know we're diverging a little bit, I'll bring it back, but I would say that that's centered a little bit around intellectual modesty, right? And that you're able to step back a little bit from your own self and take in other people's wisdoms, other people's words without right away going in and talking. And
it's active listening.
Active listening, which is we're taught like 101 here at Ta'leef, active listening. But I will say that this one part where Imam Maulud talks about talking about being courageous enough to speak truth to power, basically right off the beginning. That hits home a lot with many folks today. I don't know what to say about that anymore because I feel like we as a society are almost all in a situation where we're so eager now to speak truth to power.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
You understand what I'm saying?
I know what you mean.
Like you
Yeah.
even mentioned a little bit call out culture,
Yeah,
right?
we're in the cancel
Instead of
culture.
call in culture.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go ahead. What were we gonna say?
I'm just, you said, the way that you framed it, call out as opposed to call in.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
Prophet ﷺ used to call people in. He
Mhm.
called them out on things. Like
Mhm.
he did it better than anybody else,
Mhm.
right? But they still felt like there was a door in when he did that.
Yeah.
I feel nowadays, when we allow this kind of culture to permeate within the Muslim lens, we haven't filtered it in a way where it allows folks to still be called in. It's just like call out and that's it. What do you think?
Well, my Imam, Imam Warithadi Muhammad Allah Yahamahu, all these people pass away, but he would say that the Muslims, that we set the standard, right? Like we set the standard. We don't follow the trends. We set the standard, meaning I think the Ummah, we have to be mindful of, I think you made mention of a lens, right? So we have to be mindful of filtering it through the lens of what our practice dictates, if that makes sense. So yes, okay, the call out culture, yes, we need to be able to denounce things that need to be equivocally denounced, right? But there's also a methodology to it, right? And it needs to be done even when you are like the concept of like chastising your children. You're never supposed to do it out of anger, right? You're supposed to do it when you're
Yeah, I failed at that one.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of parents have failed at that
I
one.
continue to fail.
Right, but you're never supposed to, it's never supposed to be out of anger. Like you're doing it to teach them a lesson, you're doing it as a corrective measure, but you're supposed to control your anger before you are to admonish them. And so it's the same way, right? It's if the goal is just to cause chaos, then that is definitely happens consistently, right? But if the goal is for a corrective measure to correct the behavior, then that needs to be not just the intention, but the methodology applied to make that happen. And that's what often is missing. And so that's the lens that the Muslim needs to have with this, right? The intentionality, the thoughtfulness. Okay, so you call this person bad, that's out. Now there's a debate. Like then there's like, is it true? And all these other type of things. Like thinking about the best modality and the best methodology. I think that part is important. The other part is I think that a lot of the things that we're seeing in society today are adverse reactions to historic wrongs and abuses, historic cover-ups and suppression. Generational, exactly. And so
that's a great point.
Yeah. So I always call it like the pendulum swing. When people there's like a pendulum swing where it's like everything was so left and now everything is going right, and it's going to keep going like that until it balances out in the middle, right? And so we're kind of seeing it across the board when it comes to health disparities, and when it comes to racism in America, when it comes to sexism, and sexual abuse and assault and things like that. Like there's been so much and just even chauvinism or reverse sexism. Like there's just been so much suppression, sweeping things under the rug, and just people not acknowledging things that wrongs, historical wrongs. And so we're just in a space where like it's kind of like it's like a thread, and it gets pulled, and then everything is coming out, everything is going down, and everything doesn't deserve the same response for all situations. Everything deserves clarity and justice, but not the same response. But we have there's like one button for everything these days. And so I think
that's a great way to put it, like that one button for everything. Maybe it's not really, maybe it should maybe not be like that. And when you mentioned the pendulum swing, what hit me, the pendulum swing, what hit me a lot is that technically, we pray for this every day in prayer as much as we can. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, right? Guide us on that straight path. I would also add is that straight path means, like, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that we are a nation that's in the middle, right? That we are my nations in the middle. And so, like, even when the whole world's having this swing, right? We're supposed to be able to, like, navigate that, to be able to actually find that middle ground to help folks jump on, right? And to me, it takes, first, like Imam Maud said, it takes a lot of courage, right? And I'm not talking about the courage that it takes to get behind a keyboard and call somebody out. And, like, that's not, I'm not talking about that, right? Or I'm not talking about the courage it takes to send somebody an awful text message somewhere about how you feel. I'm talking about real courage where you stand up to folks, right? In a way where it's at the right time, in the right place, and that you know for certain that you're the right person to be doing that, right? And that's where also blameworthy modesty can also take an effect, because imagine Muhammad al-Fatih, right? The one that opened Constantinople, right? The Prophet ﷺ has a vision of that man and a dream of that man years before he comes. And he says, if you ever witness that person's army, and if you ever witness that leader, what a great leader he is and what a great army they are, right? And he gives the green light. Like, if you ever see that man, you can jump into the army. He's going to be a great leader. But how does Muhammad al-Fatih know he's Muhammad al-Fatih?
That's a great question.
How? He believes inside of him that he was made for that. And there's indications around him, obviously, spiritual and worldly, that he is that person, right? But so often, it's both ways nowadays. We have people that are supposed to be the leaders, but they have this blameworthy modesty, so much so that they take a step back and, like, no, you lead Salah.
Yeah.
No, please. No, you go ahead. I have nothing.
Yeah.
I'm nothing.
Yeah.
I do nothing. Okay, then who's going to come up and talk?
Yeah.
Who's going to come up and lead, right? Muhammad al-Fatih steps up, like, I am for it. To me, that's like the most powerful thing I've ever read, because I've never said in my life, and in understanding this tradition, right? I understood it sometimes in the wrong way, is what I'm trying to say, right? And it took me a long time to unpack, but I've never in my life just said, oh, I'm for this. You know what I'm saying? Like, even when I'm a chiropractor. So people sometimes call me doctor. Yeah. Even when they call me doctor outside of my office, I'm like, man, don't call me no doctor, right? Yeah. Why? What am I doing? Because I feel like I have, like, imposter syndrome a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so when I see someone who's like, no, like, I know my lane, and I know this is what I'm here for, is really refreshing for me.
No, I think it's a mercy, and I think that's something that we have to. I think you brought up a really great point in terms of. I feel like we had this conversation with, like, Omar Muzaffar, like, he was having these events with Muslim scholars around Chicago, and we were talking about, like, the fact that often the people who need to be in positions of leadership are like, oh no, I don't want to, I don't want to, I'm sure there's other people who are more worthy. And then everyone else is like, and it's sometimes often like foolhardy folks are like, yeah, throw me in there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or they're angling for things.
Yeah.
And my teacher always said, whoever says, I want to be the leader, that's not the person.
That's not the person.
That the people will always decide. So at the end of the day, if the job and the duty calls for you and you're put into it, and that's the validation in khalas.
That's a great point. Is the fact that it unfolded and you are in that, it means that's the validation.
That's Allah's will.
Wow.
That's Allah's will. So
I
then
never thought about it
for any of us to deny that, you know what I'm saying? And to just be like, then it's, فَبِأَيِّ عَلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, and which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? God is telling you this is the thing. It would not have happened without his idhn, without his permission. So if it's happened, it's occurred, then you walk into it and you step into the mantle that has been presented, the path that has laid its unfurled itself before you, But we all have that. We're taught, and one of my friends, again, she just pushes me, she just kicks my butt until I get into my head. But we have that. We don't want to speak of the other leader. We want to tread lightly on the earth. We don't want to, we don't want to become like in the Lord of the Rings, like precious, like all,
Sniggles.
Precious. Like we don't want to get all, we don't become Smeagol. We don't.
I just watched that movie with my wife recently.
Yeah.
All the three, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm cracking up so hard.
It's great. It's a phenomenal film trilogy, and so we don't want to become that. We don't. So we're taught that, and there's like a religious modesty, a hayat that we have. We're supposed to have, but that was the thing. I think Dr. Bilal Ware was saying, like, the baby is not born with fear and self-doubt. The baby tries to get up, can't walk, gets up, falls down, tries again, keeps going, right? So it's okay to have reproach of oneself, but if it's stopping you from doing good, that's from Shaitan. That's from Satan. If you are motivated, you're in something in your intent, and something is telling you you have it in your spirit to do good, and then you start becoming fearful and filled with doubt and all that kind of stuff, or like that's the difference between reproach and Shaitan's whispers, right? And that was very what's the word, freeing, right? Because I feel like that's the line we're always trying to. I don't want to be haughty. I don't want to be arrogant. I don't want to be this, that, and the third, right? The Shaitan is going to make you think that so that you don't do anything good. So you're trying to do a thing that's good. And then you're like, well, no, because I don't. So that's one way to tell. For me, that was very freeing.
I think when we talk about modesty, by the way, it's amazing how short this chapter is.
So short.
But it's so concise. Which really shows like what a level of a human being this individual was, right? For to be able to talk about something and be so concise about it. And he writes in this, and I thought this was something nice to pull out from the book. And then you can tell us what you think about it. He says, the Prophet ﷺ's wife Aisha once said, the best women were the women of the Ansar because modesty did not prevent them from learning the religion. A woman once came to the Prophet ﷺ asking a specific question about menstruation. The Prophet ﷺ answered her, but the women persisted in asking for more detail. The Prophet ﷺ then asked Aisha to show the woman what he meant, for it was a bit awkward for him. Some women even sent the clothes used for their menstrual protection to seek out with certainty what constitutes the beginning and the end of the menses, which determines whether or not certain rites of worship may be resumed. Most women would not feel comfortable with that, but the modesty of these women did not prevent them from seeking out knowledge about their religious affairs. Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.
The first thing I get out of that is what a human being the Prophet ﷺ was. You know what I mean? That's the first thing I get out of that. And then the second thing I get at that is like, what kind of amazing community they lived in where that could just happen. What do you think?
So remember I said there were two things that stuck out?
Yeah, that was it. Because that hit me so hard when I read it. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when she said the best women were the women of the Ansar because modesty did not prevent them from learning their religion, I was like, that's my kind of woman. You know what I'm saying? I was like, so
Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar. God is greater. So yeah, I thought it was dope. Like I think that they were gully. Like we have this and just this,
yes.
we have this sometimes unrealistic pie in the sky, and they were all
I would say
burning.
romanticized.
Yeah, romanticized, and they were all eating medjool dates and like
From California.
you know, right? They were all eating medjool dates, and you know, they were just all like, you know, alhamdulillah, and fasting was easy for everyone, and they just all like everything was just in like they were gully. Like you got to remember the Quraysh, right? Like we're looking at, and then the Muhajirin, we had the Ansar, like all these different folks, all these different groups. Like these were like feudal times. The women were like, these were like a Bedouin. Like these are like, these are the gulliest folks. You know what I'm saying? Islam came to the Arab world because they needed it. Folks were gully. You know what I'm saying? And so like folks were really real, like the way that people would approach the prophet sometimes, like the companions were like, yo, that is the prophet. I need you to calm down just a little bit. And then the prophet didn't even reproach them, you know? So I say all this to say that I respect that in terms of that, just the statement that these women did not let modesty stop them from learning about their religion. Why? Because even beyond being courteous to an extent to the Prophet, they need to know what their obligation is to their Lord, period. Right. And so even when you were mentioning earlier, we were talking about like, like calling people to the middle path. And like the first place to start is ourselves. Right. If people would police themselves better, then we wouldn't have to worry about everybody
people
else.
Would call themselves out.
Call themselves out in
whatever
into account, wherever. Then if we could do that, we wouldn't have to be worried about what other people are doing because everybody would, and so that's the first place to start. And so I respect that, and I think that it made me think of, I took Dr. Amina McLeod Aldine's class at DePaul, and she had this book by Fatima Marnisi, and it was just talking about how like the burden of religious modesty often falls upon the woman, in various cultures. And there was this book with this excerpt, and they were like, and her hands are so fair and so delicate, so they must be covered. And her this is so that, and this is that. And before you knew it, it was like, where's the woman? There's like it's just where is she? Like it's like they gave all this responsibility, like because the woman is beautiful, because she's this, then she has to be covered this way and that way, and not just like, before you know it, like there's just full burqa, right? And I'm not denouncing burqa, but I'm saying like the reasons you're giving are false, right? Because I remember we were studying at Abu Nur, and
this is in Damascus.
In Damascus, Syria. We were studying. I was in school there, and the girls had a uniform, was hijab and jilbab, and then the Americans, we came in there with the bright colors, and they're like, okay, y'all need to just do blue, white, and gray, and maybe black, blue. They're like, no, calm down. And then, but then we would leave and go to Suqa Hamidiyya. We would go to the marketplace, and the boys were playing basketball, and they had no shirts on. They're sweaty. They got no shirts on, and I'm like, this is okay. Like, so we don't have eyes. It's just only right. And so I denounce that. I denounce putting the burden of religious modesty when we talk about like lowering the gaze. That's on both sides. And when we talk about lowering the gaze, and that's on both sides. And then being courteous, not to be too overt in a way that it may, what I'm saying, affect someone else or take them out of themselves. That's for every person, number one. But in regards to this, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
No, but in regards to this, how often are the cases where it's like there's this expectation that women shouldn't, you can't have these certain conversations, and to ask this question in a public space, or to do this or that is a problem, or it's too untoward, or what have you. And these women were taking the past version of a maxi pad and being like, Prophet, is my cycle done or not? Because they wanted to be correct in their religion. Alhamdulillah, we've come a long way. We don't need to do all of that these days, but You know, it's just
Well, the way it translates for me, it translates, me, a man, right?
mhm,
Not a woman.
okay.
I never identified as a woman, and you got to say that kind of stuff nowadays, right? But
I
like
mean,
but the reality is, me as a man who's been Muslim, uh, at least born into a Muslim family and raised as a Muslim,
mhm,
and has taken like the shahada, the testimony for myself at one point to really abide by this tradition
mhm,
as much as I know it. Um, I have been in classrooms where I myself am ignorant about a certain topic, but yet because of this,
mhm,
that we're talking about, because of this blameworthy modesty, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to ask that question right
mhm.
now. And I
We've all
really,
done that.
yeah, and you know what? I've always kind of upset with myself about it. Like folks here tonight, like if you have a question, ask the question, right? Folks that are online, ask the question. It's the only way we're really going to learn, and I guarantee, the amazing thing about Sayyidina Umar, right? Everybody talks about him and like, Sayyidina Umar, he's going to cut your head off. Sayyidina Umar,
Shaitan would have crossed free.
so Shaitan be over there and he'd be over here. Sayyidina Umar, he's the man of men. And that stuff is all very true. I would never take that away from Sayyidina. Sayyidina, you can't take that away from him.
Mhm,
The Prophet ﷺ gave it to him and God gave it to him. You can't take that away from him.
sure.
But he used to ask questions that he knew the answers to,
Mhm,
because he knew there were others in the room that
mhm,
were too shy to ask it
mhm,
on their behalf, and nobody would ever know that.
mhm.
And they would just think he was the one who was ignorant of that situation. So
Mm.
he took that upon himself. And that, I'm like, that's why he stayed normal.
How many of us do that though? We don't want to look stupid. I know the answer to that. So we're not gonna I don't want to look stupid.
Right?
So I'm not gonna do that. Yeah. We gotta free ourselves, man. And that's the bottom line. I'm working on it. I'm working on being free. I'm working on uncolonizing my mind.
Allah.
Seriously. Because a lot of it is that.
Hmm.
But we've got to free ourselves. The religion has freed us. Allah has freed us. It's really for us to unshackle ourselves. Seriously. We got to really look at the lives of the Sahaba. I think that what you just, that narration that you shared from Omar was a great example. This, if we make this way of life something that's stuffy and mechanical and impossible to practice, it's not going to be useful. Like it's not. It has to be. This is for us to make our lives easier. Even in the things that look like restrictions, the reality is the things that we can do are much more than the restrictions. When you look at the restrictions are small and they are there to make life easy, even if it seems like a restriction. I wouldn't even use a restriction, maybe a boundary, right? The prohibitations or whatever, the prohibitions, they're there when you indulge in the things that you're prohibited for, it sends you on a life that corrupts your life. How many people die of what they call preventable, what they call self-induced, illnesses, right? Like you look like cirrhosis of the liver, right? It's
Right.
because like no one was born with a bottle of alcohol in their hand or system or whatever. But there was an indulgence that took someone down a track that took them to an illness that gave them a sickness, right? So how many illnesses that does mankind suffer from that really is from our own hands, right? So there are things that we look at as restrictions if you compare it to what I don't want to say secular society, but like what the world would call it. But the reality is a lot of the things give us balance. And so yeah, I don't know. It's just made me think about that.
Hmm. Well, in the book, it also mentions about when the Prophet ﷺ had guests over.
Yeah.
And this one, I think is extremely relatable. But what did you get out of that, real quick?
I mean, I think we're just so I think so just to I guess
Yeah.
to cap it all, um they gave the definition of the religious modesty of the not religious modesty, but honorable modesty as, well, blameworthy modesty is, not denouncing something that needs to be called out, or not asking questions when you need information for fear of meekness. Any of it is because your meekness or being overly shy, or actually, let me just give the actual definition because I don't want to. Yeah. So modesty becomes blameworthy if it prevents you from denouncing what clearly should be denounced, such as tyranny or corruption. And then it says it can also be the result in timid failure to denounce those things. And it says there was another part, but it was just basically saying if you need to get information and you're being too meek about it, that's a blameworthy modesty. Get what you need to get so that you can reach the height of your potential in this life and the next. And when they were saying in terms of honorable modesty, the example was like when the Prophet ﷺ, when he married his wife Zainab, radiallahu anha, during their wedding that night, they fed everybody till they were full. And, everybody left afterwards except for 3 people, and they lingered. And the Prophet got up, did what people do, like, oh, it's like it's time to go. And they stuck around, and, he did it like twice, and they still didn't get it until it was revealed to the Prophet. He recited Quran, and that's how revelation came. Like, it would come to the Prophet, be revealed upon his heart, and he would recite it. And so he's like, can you imagine, like, you're in a dinner party, people were sticking around, and it's like all of a sudden it says,
the
revelation is coming, and it's saying,
and it's about you.
It is about you. It's like, when you've eaten and taken your fill, then go home. And don't linger. The Prophet was shy about it, but Allah is not shy. That's what it says.
No, but see, this to me is one of those moments that proves that the Prophet ﷺ spoke the truth. Because out of his own character, he wouldn't say anything to them. It's his wedding night. People are out staying their welcome, right? And the Prophet ﷺ is still being an individual who's gracious enough not to say like, hey, listen to it, it's my wedding night. What y'all doing? Like, what are you guys doing here this late? What is it? He doesn't do anything. He just gives them a few indications, right? In a subtle way. They're not getting the subtleties.
No.
And you can't blame them either, because I guarantee if you all were in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ, y'all don't want to leave either. You know what I'm saying? Y'all won't want to leave either. I wouldn't want to leave. There's people that used to sleep at right behind his home, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, outside. They're called Ahl al-Sufa. They're the people of the line, right? They're just laying there, and they never leave because they love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these people that are with him, I don't blame them either, right? But your Lord said enough is enough. You know what I'm saying?
Literally, he's sitting there, and then what does it say? He did this again, like got up and tried to leave and give them an inclination, and then he did this again, and it was revealed because the Prophet was too shy and generous. And it says, so can you imagine just, all of a sudden Revelation is saying, when you are invited to enter, and when you have completed the meal, disperse and do not linger on for conversation. This used to hurt the Prophet, but he shied away from telling you, but God is not shy of the truth.
Amen. So that to me is one of those moments in Muslim history when people are like, how do you know the Quran is the truth? It's like, well, the Prophet ﷺ was trying his best to be polite about something.
Yeah.
And it was clear that he didn't want to say anything. But then God spoke. And then when Gabriel comes down with that message and God is giving revelation, whether it was through the bell or Gabriel, because there's different ways in which revelation comes down, but they always knew when it came down. Like the camel would, out of the sheer heaviness, when the Prophet ﷺ was on the camel, the camel would have to bow down or kneel because it couldn't hold
the weight.
And they would say, the Quran says that about itself. Allah says these words about the Quran, that if I were to reveal it upon a mountain, it would crumble. So of course a camel is not going to be able to handle it, right? So the Prophet ﷺ is there, and now he has to say it. that's an indication of his message,
Yeah.
that he is truthful,
Yeah.
that he's honest. But that, go ahead, please.
No, I mean, that's kind of basically what happened. And but what they're saying is, I think the balance, what they're saying that the Prophet ﷺ, that this verse applies particularly to those visiting people whose obligations and time constraints are greater than others, like statesmen and scholars, because they may also feel shy about cutting visits short when they are the host. And that the Prophet was too modest to tell his guests that it was time to leave, but it was out of his generosity and benevolence that he did not address his guest this way. So I think the note here is just is graciousness and delivery, right? Because he also kind of talks about there's certain people who wouldn't hesitate to be like, yeah, you ain't got to go home,
But you gotta get up.
but you got to get out of here. And so, what Imam Sultan Muhammad of Mosque Mariam, he's like that in terms of if he's talking to someone, even if like, how other people will come and be like, well, I just want a quick second. He's still intent with his conversation. He's like, just give me 1 second. And you feel visited with until he's done with his conversation. And then he'll say, okay, now I can address.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm really trying to learn that art. It's an immaculate patience that he has, and a discipline to not become distracted with someone else who's like, but also acknowledging them, right? But just kind of really reteaching someone etiquette. Like, I'm with this person, I acknowledge you, but we're here. So I think that, the balance is, no, we don't need to just be, we're not going to get revelation to say, leave my house, right? So we've got to find the balance of that, which is, again, not loving someone enough to hold them in account, and not, not esteem them so much that we can't reproach them and say, hey, I got an early morning, so I'm gonna have to get some sleep. But you all are welcome to have some water before you leave. And yeah, we got to find a way to do it, and for ourselves. Yeah,
I agree. I was with, I believe it was Imam Zaid one time, and there was a lady speaking to him, and she was speaking to him for a while, and he was already standing, taking questions in for like, no joke, after the lecture for like 3 hours. He was just standing there, and I was just observing, because I was like, what, I want to see what happens here, because nobody is ending this line that keeps formulating around him, right? And at the same time, it's been 2 hours at that time since the lecture.
Yeah.
And the lecture was already an exhausting lecture, like 2 to 3 hours. And he's just standing there. He's just taking question after question, question after question. And I thought, you know what? Forget it, man. It's Imam Zaid. I'm just gonna go up there and just like pull him away. Like, forget it. Nobody else. It's been 2.5 hours or something at that time. And there was this old lady. She was talking to him. She was talking to him for some time, and I was coming up there like, I'm gonna rescue Imam Zaid from people. Like, I'm just, that's it. He must be exhausted. There's no way. I see him leaning on the stage. There's no, I see he got his Clarks on, and they're not helping him anymore. And then all of a sudden, he sees me. And right before I say anything, he just grabs my hand and squeezes my hand. Like,
I'm good.
Yeah. And I got it. I was like,
there you go. But you offered it, and that's the important part, right? Because I've been in the same situation, and the person's like, thank you. Like, I was secretly making this dua.
That somebody pulled me out.
So I think, sometimes you're gonna, sometimes it's gonna come out a win, and sometimes it's gonna but either way, the thing was that you were mindful of it, that someone was there. Either way, it was still your obligation to see it, to check, to offer, and then he can make a decision. So
that's great that you said that, because all these years I was like, man, Imam Zaid, he just like taught me a lesson there.
No, I think it's both.
Yeah.
And for all of us who've been around, and I think that's the thing about like, when now that I think about that, these 3 people who were sticking around, I'm wondering if they had not been in the Prophet's company, so someone's company, as frequently, right? Because I think about my time with Imam Muhammad, and people would just swarm him, and and things like that. And I would often step back because I got to be in his company very often, and there were times where I wouldn't, blameworthy modesty, I wouldn't, interject in certain conversations or certain things because I'm like, I know I get that time or what have you, So I'm wondering if they were people who don't they either thought they were closer to the prophet because everybody thought that they were closer to the prophet, or they were people who may have not. My thoughts. These are just my thoughts. Maybe there were people who don't get to be in his company often because those who do know, okay, he's probably tired. Let's go. Inshallah, we'll catch him another time. And these people are just like starstruck, not just starstruck, but just like love struck.
Yeah, I would be starstruck and love struck and everything struck if the Prophet was.
I would as well. We would all be in there just like, oh.
And at the same time, I would say he was also extremely hard to look at, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the companions were in front of him, they had so much actual modesty in front of the Prophet ﷺ that they literally, some of them couldn't remember how he looked like after he passed, because they rarely looked at his face. Because it was so luminous, and they would just look down. And there's narrations of the companions just sitting, and birds would literally sit on the companions' heads because they're so still when the Prophet ﷺ is speaking. So there's also that flip side of the coin, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing that we have this tradition. It's amazing that we have these guides through these books. I think it's also an indication of how real and expansive this tradition is. Once it's touched with a sincere heart, that it expands for you the meanings of all of these things that we were talking about, right? The meanings of whatever we said was restrictive or not, when it's touched with that sincere heart. And I believe, like, it's just Malcolm is one of those individuals that just like brought such a sincere heart that, he spent only 8 hours of his life in Medina. I don't think most people know this. He spent only around 8 hours of his life in Medina.
That's wild.
And when you read how he describes Medina, it's like he didn't miss anything at all.
Not a beat.
What kind of?
A few moments can change your life. A few moments can change it. Like literally, when you think about moments, like before you married your wife, she was your fiance, and then when you signed the contract or when you said, I accept you or whatever, in that moment, you became married.
Right.
You were not a parent.
Right.
And then when the baby is born, you're a parent. So it only takes a few seconds to change one's life. So the 8 hours in Medina doesn't shock me. It's not unfathomable that he could have this life-changing experience. But yeah, you don't hear that often. Amir, were you going to say something? Oh, okay. So
we're good on time? Okay, yeah, this is a good time for Q&A, inshallah. We'll have Sister Ndidi answer everything. So it'll be fantastic.
I've been talking too much. Look at my water.
Bismillah. If anyone on Zoom, inshallah, has any Q&A questions, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. I repeat, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom, inshallah. Does anyone in this space have any questions for Bismillah?
Assalamu alaikum. The beginning of the discussion, especially when Ali was sort of mentioning his experience with his in-laws and stuff, it sort of reminded me something Ustad Ubaidullah said last week. He said, in terms of the convert perspective, you view acquiring as faith as more of the personal choice, I chose this. See, rather than your faith being cultivated by the culture around you, which is the case for a lot of people who are born into the religion. So I guess my question is like, when you were going like through those like interactions, was it a like battle like between the two, where faith is more of a personal choice, where so I'll like let the process be, and if it's right for them, they acquire the faith? Or do you like have to be stern and sort of like build a culture where faith is acquired, especially as when you're dealing with your kids and your in-laws and stuff? And do you think that view of, oh, it's my like choice, or it's like someone like else's choice, is that is that stopping a person from like building a culture to cultivate the faith? Or is that view too like liberal in your mind?
Okay.
Complicated question, sorry.
That was a great question. And so the first thing that came to my mind when you were asking that question is, I never viewed it as anyone's choice. I viewed it as God's choice. I never once viewed it as anyone's choice. I viewed it as God's choice, meaning I can be out of this tradition tomorrow. I'm 35 years old or whatever. Tomorrow I can be, yo, peace, I'm done with this, right? I don't necessarily hold that that part of my heart the way that God holds it. And he unveils to his servant, whoever he pleases, to be in that state. Like she talked about moments, right? Sayyidina Umar was ready to kill the Prophet ﷺ when he took his shahada. I mean, that's a moment. He brought his sword and wore it around his neck, looking for the Prophet, peace be upon him, to end his life. And instead of ending his life, the Prophet ﷺ started Umar's life. Literally, instead of ending his life, the Prophet ﷺ starts Umar's life right there and then. So like the first thing that comes to me is that I don't, and this is one part of your question, and Ndidi, please hop in whenever you want. The first thing is that I don't think about it as, man, are they going to make this choice or they're not going to make this choice? I literally go to God in these instances. I literally go to God every time. Oh, when they see me, Allah, please let them, let them have an open, right? When they see my kids and my kid is praying right in front of them saying, Allahu Akbar, Allah Akbar, like my 2-year-old, he comes up, he's like, Allah Akbar. And my mother-in-law is like, what is he saying? Why is his forehead on the floor, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, he's just praying, and then she's like, oh, what's Allahu Akbar mean? God is greater. Okay. That's da'wah.
There you go.
That's da'wah. You don't have to do anything. Who set up that situation? It was God, right? I didn't set up that situation. I think organic is always great. I think organic, even the way the subtleties in which I hope and I pray Talif's ethos manifests itself around these discussions has always been like organic, right? It's never like this force kind of fed da'wah, right? Oh, we're doing da'wah. Oh, hey, Ndidi, you and me tonight, what we're doing is da'wah, okay? Get your pamphlets ready. You know what I'm saying? I'm not knocking on people that do pamphlets. There's, Muhammad Ali used to sign his name on pamphlets of Islam to hand it to people. And they'd be saying, why are you signing your name on pamphlets? He's like, because I hope one day, if they really care about me and they care about my name, that maybe you might entice them to open up the pamphlet and read from it, right? He's a sincere individual. But what I'm trying to say is organic, right, is usually the best flow. The second thing that you mentioned is then an internal thing, not dealing with my in-laws. You mentioned, unless I misunderstood you mentioned something like of a setting of a culture with children and with my wife and within our own household, right? That one's a lot harder for me. Because man, do I want to reach there, That one, I'm like, hey, we need to stop watching TV right now because I don't want my kids watching TV, right?
Oh, wow.
Or like, it literally happens to me. Or I'm like, Effie, we have to speak Arabic in this household. We have to. And she speaks Greek, English, and she's trying with Arabic. I speak English and Arabic, right? and I'm trying with Greek, right? But the kids come back to us and all they do is speak English, no matter what we do, right? They understand, I think they understand the Arabic. Like when I tell him something like Baba Ruh Jib, he goes and brings it, right? That's what it means, Baba. When you say, this is something else, like when you say Baba in Arabic, talking about culture, it makes absolutely no sense here, and I don't know how to explain it, but you might call your son or your daughter father.
Yeah.
And I know
That's in every culture. Little mama, come here, mama.
Yes,
come here, papa.
exactly, like that.
Papa.
And sometimes
Yeah.
that's hard for me to translate, but I'll tell him that, and then he'll go get the thing. So I'm like, oh, okay, he understands it. Then he comes back and he speaks to me in English, right? And I'm like, man, how am I going to get these kids to learn Arabic, right?
You're gonna send them over.
What was that?
You're gonna send them over.
What was that?
You're gonna send them over.
Overseas?
A little bit.
I thought about that.
Yeah. That's what the Africans do. The Nigerians
really?
and stuff. They get you to go to school there, get the discipline and things like that. But go ahead, keep talking. Finish it. There's another question?
Yeah, just to finish this thing.
No, okay, go ahead.
Just the first piece, when you're talking about greater family, I think organic is the best. If there's an opportunity for dialogue, don't shy away from it like I do. Sometimes my father-in-law wants to talk to me about God, and I'm sitting here like, man, I'm not trying to have this conversation right now. I'm trying to enjoy my spaghetti. You know? Like, really?
Can the brother
Like,
get some
why,
spaghetti?
yeah, can I just eat my spaghetti while I'm having this conversation right now, right? But then that's just like, that's me because I'm shy. I don't want to sit there and start talking about God to everyone. But he's asking, and he's sincere, and he wants that moment, we give it to him. First thing, organic. Second is when you're talking about internal home structure, right? The first thing that comes to mind is whoever you're married to. And inshallah, for those of you looking married, you all get married. Inshallah, for those of you that are married, may Allah increase love and mercy between the both of you. But I think that is literally the hardest question when it comes to marriage. What kind of culture do you set in your household for your children to actually live by, right? I think it's the hardest. And I've known my wife since I was 15 years old.
By the way, your wife is tuning in, by the way.
Oh, this is awkward. Yeah. Hey, babe. No, I'm just like, so I've known my wife since I was 15 years old. I'm 35 or 34 or whatever. Lunar, I think 35, right? So we still have debates. Even though I've known her since I was 15, we still have debates on what kind of things we want to set for the kids till this very day. So the most important thing, I think, is just literally being open enough for communication with your spouse to set that culture up first. If you ever cut that communication, you cut everything else. When communication goes, everything else goes with it. So you always have to have the ability to have that dialogue. Hey, what are we going to do around Christmas time? I know your parents want us there. What are we going to do with the kids around Christmas time? And we had that dialogue. You see what I'm saying? And I'm cool with what we came out with. What are we going to do around Halloween? What are we going to do around the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, right? Because some family members probably think it's like, what are you doing? And some family members will probably think like it's cool. I'm just being real with you, right? The first thing in the household with kids, you got to kind of slowly, gently block everybody else out. I'm just being real. And decide within the household between the spouses what kind of culture y'all want to set. And what's going to happen usually is you're going to set a certain culture, and then you're going to have to be okay with that shifting multiple times over and over and over. That's the best I can answer that question with Ndidi.
Well, I wasn't going to share anything because I didn't, but I think since you kind of drawn this picture, I do have some inputs having grown up in a multicultural house as well.
Please.
So when you say what's the culture, I'm thinking the culture of righteousness, right? The culture of sincerity and the culture of good conduct,
That's
right?
beautiful.
And it doesn't, neither culture, neither ethnicity, neither language has a dominance or is more dominant in that period. The children should learn Greek and the children should learn Arabic. And the children should learn Arabic because the father speaks Arabic. And the children should learn Greek because the mother speaks Greek.
Yes.
And children should learn English because they live in America and we speak English here.
And Chinese now.
There you
Mandarin.
go. There you go. You know what I'm saying? So these are those things. I will say that it is important to try to do it in the household as much as possible because, you know, my dad worked very long hours, so I didn't really learn Igbo like I wanted to. So yeah, so it's you know, you usually get the language that with the parent that's in the house the most, unless both of you speak it together.
Right.
So I think that part is really important. And then I was saying, you know, I'm not saying going abroad is the answer for everything, but you get the fluency of it. You like when you're younger, you're learning it, you're hearing it, but you get the fluency when you go abroad. I'm not saying that abroad is the answer. I'm not saying that there's more potency or anything like that, but you get the concentration when you have like immersion and sink or swim. My godchildren are learning Spanish. They went to Ecuador or whatever. Okay, they're learning different languages, and you know you get that immersion. The other part is I just wanted to make a point about the pamphlets and things like that because I think that's really important. When we look at, you know, most Black Muslims and Black converts, like from my mother's generation, you know, and from, you know, even from like the early 1930s and things like that, you have people who are the most degraded and denigrated in society, just on the strength of being Black alone, that take on this religion that is looked at as a foreign culture and this dress and garb that's completely, they already stand out, right? And now you have this garb and all of these things, and it's completely contrary to anything anybody knows, white or Black, right? In America, basically, in an outward fashion or public fashion. And you're donning these fits and you're donning this stuff, and then you're going to tell your family, like, I'm a Muslim now. And they're like, they have no concept of like how to perceive this. And there's not half the information about Al-Islam out in those times as they are now, but these people were still very firm in who they are and the transformation that it made for them in their lives and things like that. So I think we just have to always just consult ourselves, consult our relationship with Allah and the Prophet, and be unapologetically who we are. And I think when you're that way and you come with that energy, not proselytizing, not criticizing, but just unapologetically who you are, right? People respect that. You know, I think about my times in high school and transitioning from private school to public school. And it was when I was like, you know what, I don't really care if I fit in or if I don't fit in. I'm just going to be unapologetically who I am. Everybody else is taken. I don't, you know, nothing that I'm doing with you guys serves me. And literally everybody just was flocking after that, you know, trying to connect and trying to like, I didn't ask it, I didn't expect it. Right. But it was like, that's somebody who is just herself, you know? And so I say all this to say, as you continue to, when you have these families, as you continue to just lead by example in the sense that you're just being who you are and how, and the beauty of what you believe in and what you practice is shown in how your spirit is and how you are, then the rest of it, I think comes. I think the rest of it comes. And in regards to the pamphlet, you know, that was a methodology that has been used for like, my mother was the person who did a lot of publications and things like that. I definitely think that they're not they were never supposed to be the only thing, but people don't read as much as they used to, honestly. And everything is digital, you know, but there is still like, you know, I want to make sure that we're not, that because society changes, that we now change our appreciation for what was the tool then, right? Because payphones were like a utility, right? But now it's cell phones, right? So I think it's important to acknowledge that especially in the 70s and 80s, and 90s, that was a modality that was very critical and helped a lot of people have clarity. It was maybe sometimes in a hospital waiting room or something like that. It was their first introduction, just make them kind of curious, and then they go seek out more information. Yeah. So yes, it's not the end all be all. It's one tool. Yeah, so it's a tool, but you have to do the work. You have to have the heart-to-heart connections and things like that. So I just wanted to put that part of it.
I love that. I love that. It reminded me of Umar Ali, his family. up in like MCC.
Yes.
North,
Yes.
and the press.
Yeah,
and,
beautiful sister.
I know.
Yes.
Amazing. And,
Alhamdulillah, Allah have mercy on her as well.
and they really did that for a while, mashallah.
Mhm.
Chicago, man.
Chi-town.
Wow.
Inshallah, we don't have anyone online asking questions. So if you do have questions, please ask them. Does anyone else in the space have questions?
We're good.
No? Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Inshallah, I believe Adi.
Okay, mashallah.
I do have announcements after you're
Okay.
done. Inshallah.
So, I did want to point out one thing to what Sister Ndidi was saying, which when she kept saying like the folks that are sent somewhere and immersed into a certain religion within a certain language to learn that language, there's something to be said about that, because even at the Prophet, peace be upon him's time, when they're born, when the babies are born, they're sent out from the city into the desert. That's not something that's happened out of nowhere. It was something so they can really understand the language, because they believed that the folks that were in Medina, in Mecca at the time, in Mecca, that was a city, and that in that specific city, that there was some parts of the Arab language that was lost, right? And they wanted to get that like authentic ability to preserve what's good from the language. They used to send them out, right?
And also the city life was making them soft too.
Yeah.
Yeah. They get the hardiness really from being
because
in the
of
country.
the Bedouin culture, right? And I can vibe with that, and I think there's a lot to be learned when it comes to that. But like, just to go hand in hand with what you're saying, it is something good to try to be submerged in a specific language, culture, in whichever way, whenever you can.
And if you can find an immersion program here, then that's great. But the point is that you just need the immersion and the sink or swim type of. For me, I think it was helpful, and I think. And like in the Nigerian culture, they'll send you back home so you can get some of that hardiness.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, structure and stuff, and then you come back.
Put that pressure on you is great.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it's the only way you get diamonds. Inshallah.
Sometimes.
Jazakallah khair for the diamonds you dropped tonight. Really appreciate it. Amazing to have you here, and amazing to have you all in the space that are with us. Alhamdulillah, for those of you that are virtual, inshallah, if you feel comfortable enough and you feel courageous enough and you feel safe enough, you could come out. We have people here in the space now. We have them, alhamdulillah, spread out really well. The space is relatively large, alhamdulillah, so we can hold a good amount in a safe place, in a safe space, in a safe way, inshallah. We take temperature checks and all of that. But I want to say God bless you all. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being with us. Inshallah, we'll be here again next week at 7:30 p.m. Central, every Tuesday with Ubaidullah Evans and whoever he has as a guest to discuss the beautiful book of Purification of the Heart. Today I was just subbing in for him. Inshallah, give him a little bit of break to rest and be with the family. And inshallah, next week he'll be on and he'll be with us. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.